The bells of the crystal court rang like knives, bright, clean, merciless. With each toll, the towers dimmed a shade, as if the citadel itself wished not to witness me walk to the gate. Frostlight bled through the facets and broke across my face in jagged patterns. I kept my chin up anyway. If they needed spectacle, I would give them poise. My name is Sera, I told myself, because names are anchors when the world tries to make you small. I held light. I will again. They said I'd breached a seal that only the High Regent and his circle could touch. They said I'd sung the Heartspire awake without sanction. They said too many things said with polished, careful mouths, while never meeting my eyes. The truth was simpler and uglier. I'd seen something I shouldn't have, the Regent kneeling before a shadow that wore a smile like a borrowed mask. I had swallowed that nightmare and pretended it was silence. Silence didn't save me. People rarely forgive the ones who know what they did. Tradition dressed my exile in ceremony. A silver shard, my shard, was lifted from the court's great tree of oaths and struck with a mallet, hairline cracks feathering its center like frost. The message was loud. Your vow is undone. Your place is undone. You are undone. They marched me through an aisle of crystal sentinels toward the eastern gate where night thinned to the first idea of dawn. No chains. Exile didn't require them. What hunted out there would be worse than iron. You learn strange things as your life burns down. For example, even a quiet crowd has texture. I felt the scrape of a dozen unspoken words sliding over my skin. I did not look for mercy among them. The only face I searched for, Lysa, who used to braid moon thread into my hair, didn't appear. Of course it didn't, cowards. Shield their eyes and call it prudence. When the final door yawned open, cold air poured in, carrying the taste of pine and ash. The guard captain, no malice, only fatigue, nodded toward the silvered horizon. Walk straight. The border winds will push you away from the cliffs. May the dawn ignore you. May the dawn ignore you. A ritual curse. To be beneath notice is the second death. I stepped out with the bells still knifing at my spine, and the gate closed behind me with a soft rush, like a held breath released. The slope fell away into a forest of pale, needled pines, their trunks catching the faintest blush of morning. I walked because there was nothing else. My heart beat loud in the hush after ceremony. That was when the wind changed. It rose not as a gust, but as a listening, air drawing itself taut. The world leaning toward a sound I could not yet hear. The first sunlight laced the wall. Treetops and the needles threw it back in quicksilver glints. And then, unfurling from the horizon like a banner, came the dawn. He arrived with it. At first I thought the light was playing tricks, an afterimage from the crystals, perhaps, but no illusion held shape the way he did. A tall figure stepping out of the radiance as if the sun had decided to wear a body for a while. His hair was the color of wheat before harvest, his skin carrying that. Faint gold you see on marble at daybreak, not beautiful in the soft, courtly way, not safe either. The air around him felt like the moment a storm breaks, a promise and a threat, married. Every story in the court had a line about him, half myth, half law. The elf king of dawn, Caliph Aranor, whose right of first light ran older than any treaty. Banished by crystal at night, claimed by light at dawn. Most treated it as a cautionary tale. Most had never met him. I am not a cautionary tale, I said aloud before I realized my mouth had moved. It was a foolish human thing to say to a king. He took me in the way a reader takes in a page. Attentive, swift, not missing much. Sera, he said, and my name in his mouth hummed like a tuning string. You kept your chin up when they broke your shard. Good. We'll require spine where we're going. No, we, I answered, even as the horizon lit behind. Him like a new language. You don't know me. I know the mark in your pulse. He lifted a hand. Light gathered, thin as silk, then threaded my wrist with brightness until a sigil surfaced under my skin. 3 interlocked rays. I hissed and tried to wrench away, but the pain wasn't pain. It was recognition. You woke the Heartspire, he continued, not unkindly. You carried a song meant for dawn into a court that feeds on mirrors. They banished. You to bury the song. I'm here to keep it breathing. I didn't wake anything on purpose. The truth shook as I said it. And if you're here to rescue me, don't. I don't wish to be a fable. Rescue? He almost smiled. No. Rescue is a word you use for someone dropped into water. You are a spark. Sparks either light or they die. I am here to claim you before the dark that asked the regent for his kneeling claims you first. The ground remembered. To be beneath my feet. The sky remembered to be sky. I remembered to breathe. Claim, I repeated, tasting the old law. That implies a choice I don't have. It implies a choice you do, Caliph said. If you refuse, you go into the forest alone with every hungry thing that can smell a broken shard. If you accept, you walk beside the dawn and make enemies who wear titles, not teeth. Both roads are true. One has more mourning. Behind the arrogance was something harder to name. Wariness, weariness. He watched me like a man who had learned the cost of speaking gently and chosen to pay it anyway. I saw what the regent serves, I said. It smiled without moving its face. His gaze sharpened. Tell me the shape of that smile. Like a wound pretending to be a mouth, I swallowed. Like hunger that found manners. Then we're late, he murmured. The court's shadow has already learned to beguile. He offered his hand, palm up, the light around his fingers steady and unadorned. No ring, no chain, only the warmth of dawn pooling there as if the sun had poured itself into his skin. I did not take it. Yet, what does your claim mean? I asked. In words I can carry without dropping. That you are under my protection and within my purpose, Caleth said. You will be hated for it in places you once called home. You will be safe in ways you did not know existed, and you will sing again, not at their bidding, but at mine, at yours. The world needs a shaper of light who isn't afraid of shadows. I looked past him to the trees beginning to glow at their edges. I looked behind me to the closed gate, the cold, glittering wicked as laughter. I thought of Lysa's empty place, and the regent's bent head, and the shadow with its borrowed smile. I thought of how my name felt when I said it, out loud. Sera, still Sera, even now. I put my hand in his, light closed warm as a cloak. No weight to it, only certainty. The sigil on my wrist flared and then subsided, settling into a steady thrum that matched the sunrise. Good, Caleth said softly. Now don't be frightened when the sky breaks. It prefers to do that when I make promises. I almost laughed, almost said I was done being surprised, when the eastern ridge lifted like a hinge and away. Seam of darkness tore through the brightening blue. Not cloud, not storm. Something tearing the morning itself as if it were a curtain, and we were an audience to a stage we were never meant to see. From within the rip, lantern-cold lights blinked open one by one, like eyes. They're early, he said, voice tightening. What are they? I whispered. He didn't answer. He drew his sword, which looked less like metal and more like a slice of daylight, made obedient, and set his body between me and the rent in the sky. Even with my fear cresting, a part of me noticed how he moved. Economy of motion, no waste. A man who had been a weapon long before he became a king. Stay with me, Sera, Caleth said without looking back. And when I ask for your voice, don't ration it. Let it burn. My mouth went dry. You think I know how to do that on purpose? I think you will. He smiled then, quick and fierce, like a challenge handed to a worthy opponent. Dawn keeps its own. The first of the lantern eyes blinked wider and spilled a ladder of shadow toward us. I opened my mouth. If this story pulled you in, tell me where you're watching from and what you think that rip in the sky really is. Drop a comment and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The first shadow touched the ground, like spilled ink learning how to stand. Where its feet set, frost hissed and went dark. The lantern light inside it, an orb suspended in a hollowed head, swayed once, searching. I felt it find me. Now, Caleth said. I didn't know what now meant until the mark on my wrist steadied, then pulled, like a thread being drawn through fabric. My breath wanted to come in short, frightened pieces. I forced it long. The memory of the Heartspire rose up, stone resonating, air turning into a throat for something older than speech. And my ribs remembered the shape of that song before my mind did. I sang. It wasn't pretty. It was too bare for beauty. A note like white heat, another beneath it like a river under ice. The ladder of shadow trembled. The lantern eyes flared. Caleth stepped forward, the blade in his hand catching my sound and throwing it upward in a clean, bright arc. The rip in the sky shrank where the arc touched it, recoil moving through the tear like a shutter. 3 more figures fell from the seam, boneless until they remembered bones. One lunged. Caleth met it, daylight shearing through darkness with a smell like rain on sun-warmed stone. The cut didn't bleed. It sighed, and ash blew outward in petals. Again, he said without turning. Hold the note on the exhale. I held it. The mark on my wrist beat against the song like a second heart. The shadows slowed, as if moving through. Syrup, but slowing wasn't stopping. One broke the drag and surged past Caleth straight for me, lantern swinging, empty mouth gaping into a smile that wasn't a mouth at all, the borrowed smile. Something in me tried to collapse inward. Another something reached for the ground. I sank my heel into the pine-needled slope and let the low note drop lower, past fear, past breath, into the place that had watched the regent bend and had not looked away. The air thickened. Light thickened with it. The shadow hit that thick place and tore. When it tore, it screamed. No sound, just the memory of a scream, old and salt-sharp. Caliph moved through the rest like a promise kept. He wasn't ruthless. He was precise. Where my voice held the fabric, his blade stitched it shut. When the final lantern winked out, the rip puckered and sealed, morning reasserting itself as if it had never been questioned. Silence afterward felt like a startled animal, ready to bolt. My knees wanted to follow. I swallowed and stayed upright. Caliph lowered his sword. The daylight in it dwindled to the suggestion of steel. He looked me over the way he had when we first met. Quick, thorough, not missing much. And then, without ceremony, went to one knee. He wasn't bowing. He was bleeding. Gold seeped between his fingers where his ribs met leather. It looked warm as honey and wrong as a wound on a statue. I thought light didn't cut you, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. This wasn't light, he answered. Tone light, even if his face wasn't. It was something pretending not to be dark. He winced when he tried to stand and failed gracefully back to stillness. They're bolder than I expected. I reached, then froze, because what could I possibly do for a king who bled? Sunshine? The mark on my wrist grew hot. What happens if I touch it? You find out. His mouth almost smiled. Dawn keeps its own, Sera. I pressed my palm against his side. Heat climbed my arm to the shoulder, then dropped into the wound like stones into deep water. Something knit. It hurt, but not the way wounds hurt. More the way a thorn works its way out, honest and inevitable. Caliph let his breath out slowly, eyes half closed. When I pulled my hand back, the gold had crusted to a luminous seam. The bleeding had stopped. You've done this before, I said. I've had worse, he replied, then actually smiled at my look. The world doesn't get easier because you wear a crown. It only asks you to be honest about which enemies you keep. Those things, I said. What are they? Lanterners, he said. Borrowed eyes for something that doesn't like to step into its own risks. They open doors. They make certain promises possible that should not be. His gaze flicked to the sealed sky. They don't usually test the border in daylight. Then why now? He studied me for a breath. Because you sang at the Heartspire, and the court tried to crack you like a vessel instead of asking why the song woke for you. Because the thing behind the regent wants you shamed, scattered, quiet. It will reach through seams, it would. Normally avoid to get what it wants when dawn claims the person it hoped to unmake. I thought of the bells, the mallet, the crack. I thought of the crowd and my own name in my own mouth. I didn't feel unmade. I felt inconvenient. What happens now? I asked. Now we move, he said, pushing to his feet with care. The first claim carries you to the threshold. We cross it, and you stop being prey who got lucky and start being someone who can choose where to aim her voice. Where is the threshold? He lifted his chin toward the brightening forest. Anywhere I say it is, so long as you agree. He held out his hand. I took it more quickly this time. The warmth that folded over me felt familiar now. Not safe exactly, but readable. The world shivered. The line of trees pulled long, then sprang back sharp, but we were no longer on the slope beneath the crystal court. We stood in a clearing, with 7 white stones set in a circle, each stone etched with a shallow groove shaped like a ray. The air tasted like the space between lightning and thunder. The dawn ring, Caliph said, old as speech, stubborn as mountains. Walk with me. We stepped between the stones. The mark on my wrist hummed to match the grooves. As we crossed, a pressure left my ears, and I realized I had been carrying it my whole life without noticing. A weight like rules that were too polished to question. Here, the rules felt older, but kinder. What will you ask of me? I said. To tell me exactly what you saw when the regent knelt, he answered. To learn how to shape your voice on purpose. To choose the truth even when it refuses to flatter. And to understand that being claimed is not being owned. My breath hitched. And what will it ask of you? To keep you alive long enough to make those choices. We reached the center of the ring. Sunlight pooled there, brighter than it had any right to be, softer than it had any right to feel. I thought of hiding, then thought of singing. The two impulses felt like different names for the same thing. A wind threaded the clearing. It carried a smell I hadn't expected. Moon thread and lavender, Lisa's scent. When it touched me, it brought words that weren't sound, just as the lanterner's scream had not been sound. Delicate as silk, and cold as the space under a door. Sera, forgive me. I turned so fast the world blurred. At the edge of the clearing, where sunlight thinned to shade, a token hung from a pine branch, a thin braid of moon thread tied with a glass bead. Lisa used to make them for festival nights. A private language between us, each bead color a word. This bead was colorless, empty. I took it down. My fingers remembered the knot. My chest. Tried to forget how to breathe. Someone wanted you to find that, Calith said. No judgment. An observation offered like a hand. She was my friend, I answered. She wouldn't. The word stopped because I didn't know what she wouldn't. People who fear the wrong thing do right in the wrong direction, he said. It doesn't make the harm smaller. It makes the truth harder. The bead flashed once in the light. Inside the glass, a hair-fine crack ran through the center like frost on a window pane. A message, a mirror, a warning. Before I could decide which, the ground under the farthest stone darkened, as if a shadow had learned how to flow. It pooled, lifted, and took the shape of a woman with a lantern where her face should be. Do not sing, Calith said quietly. Listen first. Not all mouths speak with voices. The lantern where the woman's face should have been did not burn. It remembered burning. Its light went through me like cold water, and in that chill, I felt meanings assemble without words. Calith's hand hovered at his blade. He didn't draw. Listen, he'd said, and the mark on my wrist answered him with a faint, steady hum, as if agreeing that listening could be an act of war. The lantern tilted. Light bled in pulses. Long, short, then a pause. It wasn't a code I'd learned, yet my bones decided they knew. The glass bead in my palm, Lysa's, caught those pulses, and hairline fractures spidered deeper across its center. A thought surfaced, whole and aching. I didn't betray you. I failed in the right direction. Lysa's favorite kind of confession. Crooked, trying to be kind, never quite brave enough to be plain. Show me, I whispered to the lantern woman. If this is a trap, I'll sing it apart. If it's truth, I'll carry it. The light thickened until it filmed over the air. Picture upon picture layered inside that film. The mirror gallery in the crystal court, its walls faced with faceted glass that made even a breath look gilded. The High Regent kneeling before a shape that sat like a man carved out of the idea of hunger. Lysa's hands braiding moon thread around the base of a silver basin, while her eyes tracked the door, shaking. The hunger shape never turned its head, but every reflection in the room turned toward me. Borrowed eyes, lanterns without mouths. Calith shifted, very slightly. Don't swallow too much at once, he said under his breath. This is how they smuggle hooks into vision. I steadied my breathing. The film thinned and narrowed to a single detail, the basin's rim, etched with 3 words in the old tongue. Calith murmured them aloud before I could. Mirror oath invocation. He hated the way the syllables tasted. The lantern's light flickered. Affirmation. A second inscription surfaced. Newer, crude, pressed into the metal with impatient hands. First light unmade. My stomach turned. They plan to use my voice to break your dawn. They plan to borrow it, Calith said. They cannot make a note of their own that the Heartspire will recognize, so they would rather counterfeit yours, bend it through silver and glass, and call the ruin righteous. His gaze flicked to the crack inside my bead. When the light shifted again, I saw the sky over the court the way it looks on the day the moons cross each other. 2 pearls with a seam between. The Crossed Moons Festival. 2 nights from now. The bead in my palm made a sound that glass should not make. A soft, living click, as if it were swallowing. 2 nights, I said. Then we're late and right on time, Calith answered, because kings like him always carry 2 clocks. The lantern woman's body swayed. The light inside her guttered, recovered, then trembled in a pattern that hurt to witness. Not language, but pressure. Something on the other side of her lantern was pulling, as a fisherman pulls in a net. If we kept listening, the line would close around us. She's tethered, Calith said. If the tether tightens, this clearing becomes a door they can walk through with more than eyes. Can you cut it? Yes, he said, at the cost of the message, at the risk of you. I looked at the braid, at the crack, at the ring of dawnstones, etched with rays that had outlasted empires. Let me try first. If I fail, then cut. He did not like that. He let me anyway. I stepped closer until the cold wash of the lantern found the heat on my wrist and turned it into a balance instead of a fight. I lifted Lysa's bead and pressed it to the sigil on my skin. For a breath, nothing happened. Then the hum of the mark met the tension in the light, and I felt a notch. A place where the pull from beyond didn't quite line up with the pattern here. A seam. Sera, Calith warned. I see the knot, I said. Not with my eyes. I didn't sing. Not the way I had on the slope. I breathed a thread of sound between my teeth, a tone too thin to carry farther than my own mouth. The song wasn't for the world. It was for the knot. The bead warmed, the crack glowing like a hair-thin ember. The lantern's pull stuttered. Cold rushed past me in a clatter of unseen chains going slack. The woman's shape shivered. Her lantern dimmed to a milky glow through which another image flickered. Lisa's hands again, this time placing the bead in a courier's palm, whispering into it not words but intention. Forgive me. Don't come to the mirror gallery. Go anywhere else. Go to the dawn. The intention had reached me the only way it could. Not perfect. Enough. The tether yanked hard. The lantern woman jerked as if a hook had set in her spine. Shadows pooled under the farthest stone, rising like water with ambition. Caleth's blade was in his hand before I finished turning toward him. Release her, he said. I took my breath in both hands and pulled. The thin tone widened, not louder, just wider, as if I had opened a window inside it. The lantern cracked. No sound, just a shiver of pressure popping. Light poured out and faded into the day like spilled milk into tea. The woman collapsed inward, ash drifting with a smell like blown-out candles. On the ground where she had stood lay a shard of mirror the size of my palm, its backing slick with something that did not decide whether to be silver or shadow. In it, my face looked back at me. For an instant, my mouth wore the borrowed smile. The mark on my wrist flared. The smile tore like paper. Underneath, the shard showed not a face but lines, thin, bright, aching to resolve into meaning. A map, not of roads but of resonances. The court's Heartspire blazing at the center, the dawn ring pulsing where we stood, and between them a braid of lay threads pulled taut as a trap. One thread was nicked, one sang off key, one ran underneath, older than both, marked with a symbol I didn't know, a small 6-petaled flower stamped into light. Caleth's breath when he saw it sounded like recognition being forced to admit surprise. Stoneflower, he said. Old, hidden, inconvenient to tyrants. I thought the path was sealed. Not sealed, I said, though I couldn't have told you how I knew. Sleeping. We'll wake it. He didn't say how dangerous that would be. He didn't need to. The ring of stones shuddered. The shadow pooling near the far stone crept closer, testing. Caleth set his blade point down between us and it, the metal sipping sunlight. Name the seam, he told me, eyes on the dark. It's yours. It listened to you. Name it so it forgets the call that isn't for it. I swallowed. Words had weight here. I tasted the shape of the pull, tasted the lie braided through it, and spoke. No place for mouths. The shadow recoiled like a hand from a hot pan and withdrew beneath the stone. The dawn ring's hum steadied, low and sure, like a big creature settling back to sleep. Caleth glanced at me then, not like a king evaluating an asset, not like a soldier gauging a weapon, like a man who had just watched a door choose its keeper. Good, he said softly. Very good. I closed my hand around the mirror shard. It pricked my palm, a bright sting. When I opened my fingers, a thin line of blood crossed the 6-petaled flower on the map. The path answered with a faint pulse, as if it had been waiting for a cost to be paid before it woke. 2 nights, a hidden road under a louder one, a friend whose fear had tried to warn me, a court with a borrowed hunger at its heart. We go now? I asked. We train now, he corrected. And for the first time since the gate closed behind me, I laughed, quick and startled. A singer can carry only so far, on instinct. You'll need more than raw courage to thread Stoneflower without waking everything that naps along it. From beyond the ring, a far-off bell reached us. One note, then another, polished as cruelty. The court was celebrating something, or comforting itself about what it meant to do. I tucked the shard away, felt the weight of it like a vow, and met the dawn head-on. Then teach me before their mirrors learn my name. Training began with, in stillness so complete, I could hear pine sap thinking about how to rise. Caleth stood at the edge of the dawn ring, with his blade point down in the soil, the hilt cupped in his palms like a prayer. 3 stances, he said. Listen, answer, declare. Most singers try to leap straight to declaring and end up shouting. Dawn isn't impressed by volume. What does listening look like? I asked, because the quiet was already loud. Like admitting the soul. Air was here before you and will be after, he said. Set your bones like bells. Let them ring without moving. He circled me once, light dropping from his shoulders in soft sheets. He touched my collarbone, my sternum, the arch of each foot. Not familiarity, but calibration. Here, here, and here. These are your anchors. Breathe until you can feel the weight of your own name on each. I breathed. The mark on my wrist thrummed to the rhythm and then passed it, seeding my breath with a second beat. The forest said the names of its trees in a language I couldn't speak. Somewhere below, water rehearsed the work it would do when evening came. Good, he said. Now answer. How do I answer silence? You don't, Caleth said. You answer what the silence is hiding. He set a pine cone on a stone and nodded toward it. Not a weapon's note. a surgeon's, split it without shattering. It felt absurd to sing at a pine cone. It felt ruder not to try. I let the breath fall through my anchors and shaped a line so thin it hurt my teeth. The cone trembled. A seam along its spine gave quietly and opened like a yawn held in. Resin flashed. The cone didn't die. It rearranged. I grinned despite myself. That felt like cheating. That felt like accuracy. He corrected, but his mouth tugged as if he'd caught the grin and kept it. We practiced until the sun climbed and the ring's shadows shorted out to small, earnest smudges. I learned to warm dew from a spider thread without breaking the silk. I learned to lay a veil so my breath seemed to come from my left while I stood still. I learned that fear, pressed thinner and thinner between the anchors of bone, turns into attention. Attention, turned properly, turns into choice. Again, he'd say, when the tone frayed or my shoulders climbed toward my ears. Answer, not overwhelm. Dawn has no use for bludgeons. Between exercises he taught with stories, never lavish, always precise. There's an old lie, he said, drawing a small circle in the dust with his boot heel. That clarity makes you safe. It doesn't. It makes your enemies honest. That's all. Learn to prefer honest enemies. I preferred applause, I admitted, surprising myself with the ease of saying it. It sounds like safety when you're tired. He nodded once, not unkind. Most palaces run on that mistake. When the sun tilted and the shadows lengthened into themselves, he turned toward the mirror shard tucked in my belt. Stoneflower next. The path will tax us, not with coin, but cost. It wakes to truth. At each petal there's a toll. One sentence you have never dared to say aloud. You first? I asked, braver in the ring than I would have been anywhere else. Always. He inclined his head toward the white stones. Choose your door. The shard hummed when I touched it. Lines unwound and curved to the ring's northern stone. A seam thinned there, a petal's edge readied to lift. I stepped to it with Caliph, the earth cool through my boots. He placed 2 fingers against the groove etched like a ray, and shut his eyes. I stayed in a war after it ended, he said, voice level, because purpose is simpler than mercy. The groove drank the sentence like water. The stone warmed under my palm. It was my turn. The ring waited. The path waited with it, patient and old. I envied Lisa for how easily she was believed, I said. The admission cut and cleaned in the same breath. I loved her, and I envied her, and I hid the envy under useful kindness. The stone took that too. No punishment, no praise, just permission. A petal lifting, revealing a stare. That wasn't quite a stare, more a braided slope of root, polished by the passing of vows. We descended together. The stoneflower path breathed. That's the best language I have for it. The roots underfoot throbbed like slow hearts. The walls were knit from fibers that held light loosely, letting it spill in pearly threads. Sound had weight here. My footfalls left small dents in the hush that sprang back after we passed, like a mattress remembering its shape. Each time my breath shaped a note by accident, the path tugged at it, tasting intention. Don't hum, Caliph murmured. Let the road choose your measures. Isn't that surrender? It's partnership, he said. Stone builds and remembers. Dawn burns and renews. The path and I disagree in useful ways. We came to the first chamber, the first petal, said a thought not mine, and found it full of voices that had not finished speaking. They hung like cobwebs, pearled with meaning. Oaths of guardians long gone, promises broken and mended, names inked in breath. One voice brushed my shoulder, and I knew it was mine. Younger, edges too neat. I will never speak first, it said in my childhood cadence. I will wait until someone else says it is safe. I winced. Of all the vows to travel with me, leave it, Caliph said softly, or retune it. Don't wrestle it. I set my anchors, listened to the shape of that vow, and understood why I had made it. Safety in a court, where speaking first drew the regent's gaze like a blade. I didn't want that promise anymore. I didn't want to break it cruelly either. I breathed, and when the vow bowed its head to listen, I answered, I will speak first when silence is the knife. The cobweb shivered, not breaking, becoming lace. It slipped away to hang where it would not catch at my hands. Precision, Caliph said, a quiet pride threading the word. Carry that. We walked on. The second petal asked for another sentence, and I gave it. I want to be right more than I want to be loved, and I am learning to choose being true instead. The path tasted it and opened. The third petal asked for tiredness, so I told it I am tired of curating myself for people who would sell my pieces. The roots loosened like fingers unclenching. By the fourth petal, my throat burned, not from singing, from stripping. We rested in a pocket where luminous fungus patterned the ceiling like a map of winter constellations. Caliph unstoppered a thin glass vial. The scent from it was sharp and green. Bitter leaf, he said. Steadies the hum. Share? Yes, I said too quickly, and he laughed once, bright and brief, then passed it over. 2 nights, I said after the bitterness settled. They'll stage the invocation under the crossed moons. They'll try to borrow me. Do you think the path will take us fast enough? The path doesn't do fast, he said. It does true. True is sometimes quick when shortcuts would have been costly. Stoneflower has a talent for showing you where you would have tripped later. Comforting. It's honest, he said, and that was its own comfort. We rose when the path's hum thickened, meaning something had noticed us. The air cooled in a deliberate way, as if a mouth were drawing breath nearby. At the lip of the 5th petal stood a simple arch of root, with a mirror nested in its curve, no larger than my palm, exactly like the shard I carried, except this one reflected nothing at all. Another toll? I asked. Another kind, Caliph said. Speak to your reflection and see if it speaks back. If it does, don't trust it. If it doesn't, don't trust that either. I love the clarity of your guidance. You'll miss it when I don't have breath to give it, he said. Not as drama, as fact. I lifted the mirror. It gave me myself, and then it didn't. My face peeled away, and left only a lantern's hollow where my features should be. Sera? Said Lisa's voice from inside the glass. My hands remembered to be hands instead of guilt. I lowered the mirror to my sternum, set my bones like bells, and listened so hard, it hurt. The Lisa in that voice had her same quick patience, her same habit of wrapping warnings in ribbon, but it was missing a weight I knew by heart, the way her care always carried a price she intended to pay with me, not for me. No, I said, and the mirror hissed like a cat denied a comfortable lap. You may not borrow her mouth. A seam inside the sound tore. Cold rushed out and hit the floor, frosting a ring around my boots. The path shivered, disliking the frost, and the mirror's dark backed away. From farther in, something moved. Not footsteps. The opposite. A subtraction of footfalls. The absence where a person should have made noise. It came closer, wearing nobody's sound. Caliph shifted, daylight knocking along the length of his blade. Something learned from the court, he said. A courtesy predator. It approaches as politely as possible before it eats your choices. I set my breath, my name, my anchors. Stoneflower's hum met my pulse like a friend lifting a shoulder under my weight. I have a choice, I told the dark. I will spend it now. The courtesy stepped into view wearing the shape of a woman who would never interrupt. It wore quiet like armor. I felt it study the rhythm of my breath and trim its approach to match, the way a practiced liar mirrors your posture to coax agreement. May I? It asked, without sound. Pressure against the ear, the gesture of a question. Each implied word came polished to a shine and filed to a hook. Set your bones, Caliph murmured. Courtesy tastes for soft joints. Listen, answer, declare. I listened first. Under the pleases and gentle if you don't minds, I heard the true request. Give me your first yes. Let me keep it. I'll spend it where you won't notice until it's gone. The 5th petal's arch held the calm mirror that had tried to wear Lisa's voice. The path's hum pressed up under my feet, steady as a drum under silk. I let my breath fall through my anchors and felt the old vow I'd found a few chambers back. Never speak first. Lurk at the edge of my tongue like a habit asking to drive. I am done with that, I told myself. I will speak first when silence is the knife. I lifted my chin. No. The courtesy inclined its head as if I'd ordered tea instead of refusal. The pressure shifted. It was too graceful to push where I had braced fully, seeking a seam. Only a small consent, the shape suggested without syllables. Permission to set down what you're carrying. I'll hold it. I promise not to drop it. The mirror at the arch flashed, catching some pale imitation of my face. The thing wanted a yes I wouldn't miss until later. A yes I could be made to forget I'd given. Answer, Caliph had said. Not overwhelm. Dawn has no use for bludgeons. I breathed once, twice. My hands are not heavy, I answered. My burden is mine. I let a thread of tone run under the words. A surgeon's note, not a soldier's. The sound found an edge in the pressure and lifted it, like prying up a floorboard to see what scuttles. The courtesy's smile didn't change. Its feet shifted. I felt the path flex around the move, old wood recognizing old termites. The thing couldn't abide emptiness. It tried to fill every quiet with a gift. When I refused, it offered a smaller gift. When I refused that, it pivoted to the smallest. Permission to pause. May I pause you? It breathed. I remembered the long hallway of the mirror gallery, how courtiers would slow each other with compliments until someone stopped moving altogether and called their immobility poise. I remembered my ribs locked around a polite breath that wouldn't go in or out while the regent smiled and waited for me to faint. "Declare, my no is complete," I said. "It does not require reasons to make you comfortable." I spoke the words into the seam of pressure where it was most eager to be stroked, and turned stroking into a cut, clean as peeling fruit. The mark on my wrist woke hot and sure. The path hummed deeper, approving of boundaries named plainly. The courtesy flickered, the smile stayed, but the shape under it blurred, as if it couldn't remember which posture I preferred. It tried one more tool, the sharpest blade wrapped in velvet. "Please?" It had learned the word's weight from 1,000 mouths that never meant it. That was its trick. Please was not a request here. Please was a key that opened doors you didn't realize you'd locked. I folded my breath, set all 3 anchors, and let the word fall against the bell of my bones without striking them. "No," I said again, softer. Then, because the path liked truth more than triumph, I paid the toll the 5th petal was waiting for. I have said yes to be liked when I meant no to be safe. The sentence left my mouth with a burn and a relief. I will not pay with myself anymore. The arch's mirror went matte. The courtesy curtsied, a grotesque little hinge, and backed away into a powdering drift, politeness shedding like old scales. It didn't die. It remembered how to starve. The Stoneflower's hum leveled. The arch opened, not because I had won, but because I had stopped borrowing. Caliph didn't clap. He didn't praise out loud. He inclined his head as if we'd just completed a clean exchange. "Hold that edge," he said. "The court will try to sand it back down." We moved under the arch, and the air changed from resin and root to mineral and memory. The path narrowed and tilted until we were walking along the seam between 2 times. On my left, the court's first foundations being argued into stone. On my right, the same corridors cobwebbed with a future that smelled like metal and ashes. Stoneflower ran between, stubborn as promised. At the 6th petal, the toll came before the threshold. A shallow bowl of rock held a pool with no surface. Inside it, not reflections skated, images that were true if I wanted them badly enough. I saw myself walking back into the crystal court to thunderous apologies. I saw the High Regent weeping and asking forgiveness in full view of the mirrors. I saw Lisa running to me, braid in her hands, begging me to let her make it right. I pressed my nails into my palm until the hurting drew blood. The drop hit the pool, and the knot reflections flinched like moths from flame. "I wanted him to see me," I said. Calith's head turned just slightly. I kept going before I could make it gentler. I wanted the regent to notice my light for the right reasons so badly that I told myself any notice could be polished to become right. Breath, burn, relief. I won't confuse attention with truth again. The pool turned opaque, a stone that had been pretending to be water. The way forward sighed and let us through. We walked. The 7th petal's space was small, tight with acoustics, every whisper magnified. It asked for tired, so I gave it. I'm tired of rehearsing apologies for boundaries I haven't even set yet. The pressure eased. Somewhere above us, beyond rock and root, the day bent toward evening. The Crossed Moons Festival would dress the court in pearls and silk and arrange the mirrors so the moonlight multiplied. Hiding inside that brilliance would be a basin carved with first light unmade, waiting for my voice. At the 8th petal, the path widened into a cistern. Old stairs circled down to a platform where 3 iron grates faced a low channel. The hum of water came faint and far, an underground artery of the city. The 6-petaled symbol cut into the platform carried a scrape of fresh metal through its lines, as if someone had lifted the plate recently and then set it back with ruder hands. "An exit," Calith said, "and not our first to use it." "They've been feeling along the same seams. Can we come up under the court?" I asked. "Under its oldest rooms," he said. "Stone remembers the exact floorboards tyrants forget." He crouched, pressed his palm to the symbol, and looked up at me. "Your sentence." I expected pride to arrive now, trumpets and banners. Instead, honesty knocked with a smaller hand. "I keep mistaking speed for courage," I said. "I will be swift when truth asks me, and slow when fear rushes me." The plate warmed. The grates lifted on invisible hinges. Air came up with the water's breath, cold, iron-tinged, threaded with something floral and thin, moon thread, lavender. Lisa had been here. A small knot formed in my throat and then unknotted into a tension. I lowered into the channel and felt stone shave against my boots. Calith followed, his sword dim as any blade in the dark. We waited. The tunnel took us not to splendor, but to service. A run of maintenance passages laced under the mirror gallery. Through narrow slits we could see ankles of courtiers passing, pale flashes of silk, the brief sparkle of polished shoes. The festival humming began somewhere above, 1,000 bright mouths deciding what counted as joy. Farther on, a ladder rose to a hatch of wire glass. Behind it lay a storage room perfumed with oil and silver polish. Caleth touched my shoulder. He spoke with his eyes. Not yet. Listen. I pressed my ear to the seam of the hatch. On the other side, 2 voices, one brisk, one carrying a tremor it tried to drown. The basin goes up at moonrise, the brisk one said. No one touches it but the regent's hand and the proxy's. And the proxy? The tremor sharpened. Does she know? A laugh that wasn't laughter. She'll know when we need her to. Lisa's voice didn't come. Her absence stood in the room like an extra person. The brisk voice moved away. Keys rattled. Silence hatched in their wake. Then, so soft I almost missed it, a breath steadied itself and spoke a single sentence to the empty shelves. Please, Sera, aim where I could not. The hatch clicked. A thin twist of moon thread slid under and brushed my wrist. I caught it before the water could carry it away. Caleth's mouth curved without joy. We are in the right place at the wrong time, he whispered, which is how right places work. I breathed around the knot in my throat until breath became choice again. Above us, the first moon would be climbing. The second would turn its face soon after. 2 nights had become almost one. I tucked the moon thread into the cuff at my wrist, felt the mark there answer with a thrum like a promise, and looked at the hatch. Open it when I tell you, I said, and when I sing, don't let me be polite. Moonrise sharpened the court until every edge could cut. From the tunnel, I watched the servants light the mirror sconces one by one, each flame splitting into 1,000 obedient twins. The air smelled like silver polish and rehearsed laughter. Somewhere above, a choir began to hum the opening progression for the crossed moons, vowels bright as pearls. Open it when I tell you, I'd said. Caleth waited with one hand on the hatch, dawn dim to an ember under his skin. My mark beat in my wrist to the choir's pulse and then against it, like a contrary heart. Listen, answer, declare. I set my bones like bells and let the room tell me its seams. The storage shelves sighed with hidden weight. The ceiling cables hummed with tension. The far wall, thick with mirror panels awaiting carriage, held the soft click of a lock that had been turned too many times in new anger. When the brisk voice returned, footfalls clipped, keys bright, I pointed. Caleth eased the hatch a fraction. A sliver of light divided his face. We breathed with it, patient as thieves. The door opened. The brisk one, the master of mirrors, swept in with a lacquered ledger under his arm. Behind him, 2 juniors carried the basin, silver deep as still water, wide enough to reflect the sky, its rim etched in the old tongue. My eye found the crude edition gouged along the curve. First light unmade. Gently, the master said, which to him meant hurry without dropping anything. Place it there and cover it for mercy's sake. Dust sees itself in these walls if we let it. The juniors obeyed, setting the basin on the padded stand 3 steps from our hatch. The master counted flasks on a sideboard, oils to make reflections obedient, tinctures to coax a mouth from water, and read aloud to the room as if the shelves might be impressed by his diction. Mirror oath invocation, he said, authorized by the regent, witnessed by the high chorus, bound by the proxy. Our timing is elegant, our purpose inevitable, your voice tedious, Caleth breathed, dry as flint. I almost laughed, and the almost steadied me. When the master left, satisfied with his own inventory, I touched Caleth's wrist. He lifted the hatch, slow and clean, and we slipped into the storeroom's hush. Up close, the basin's silver looked less like water and more like a held breath. The crude inscription scraped at the old one like a child's knife. I pressed my palm to the underside. Cold ran up my arm to the mark. The Stoneflower path stirred behind my ribs. Is it anchored? Caleth whispered. To the Heartspire, I said, and to a lie. If they pull my voice through this, it will wrench dawn sideways. Then give it a better anchor. My blood or yours? I asked before I could swallow the thought. He didn't blink. Yours. The claim is in you. I drew a pin from the cuff, Lisa's moon thread wrapped tight around it, and pricked the pad of my thumb. The bead in the thread shivered at the scent. I wiped a single line along the underside of the rim in the shape the mirror shard had shown. 6 small arcs meeting at a center. The Stoneflower's symbol. Drank the red as if it had been thirsty for years. The basin cooled further, an almost imperceptible shift from cold to purposeful. The Heartspire's pull faltered, just a hitch, the way a liar stumbles when you say their name. I exhaled into that hitch and let a note thread through it, too thin to echo, too steady to break. Footsteps, voices, silk moved like small rivers. The door to the gallery opened without being knocked. The room swallowed its own reflection and made space for the regent. He entered with a smile that remembered being human from a long way off. The mirrors liked him because he looked at them often. He liked them because they made his face repeat until numbers drowned doubt. He carried the weightless confidence of a man rehearsed by other men. Behind his shoulder, something followed without moving, a not shadow, the feeling of hunger held in your mouth like a sour lozenge. Lysa did not come at his heel. Relief and dread traded places in my chest, then shook hands and agreed to both stay. "Bring the basin," the regent told the master, who had materialized like a bad habit. "The moons are patient, but the choir is not." The juniors took the stand. Caliph and I flattened into a low shelf shadow, his hand around mine, saying without sound, "Not yet." I could feel the blade along his spine like a line of concentrated weather. We moved with the shelf, with the stand, with the basin, into the bright throat of the mirror gallery. It looked exactly like what it was, a room designed to eat courage politely. Faceted glass from floor to ceiling multiplied the candlelight until it ceased to be warm and became performance. The choir stood on singing steps, mouths open in pearls. The high chorus clutched their scores like rosaries. At the center, beneath, the lattice of the two moons crossing, a dais waited. They set the basin on the dais. The mirrors drank the twin moons and poured them, stirred, into the silver. "Fetch the proxy," the regent said. The door at the far end opened. Lysa came in wearing festival blue and the most careful face I had ever seen her build. The care was not to impress. It was to survive. Moon thread braided her hair. At her throat hung a colorless bead with a hair thin. Crack. When she saw the basin, the crack widened a breath. My name stood up inside me. I almost said it aloud. Calith's fingers tightened once, listening, not forbidding. We had little time and smaller mercy. I swallowed the sound and tasted salt. "Her," the master said, with the delighted cruelty of someone who thinks he invented inevitability. "She's steady. She won't faint." I detest fainting. Lysa stepped to the dais. She didn't meet the regent's eyes. She didn't look at the choir. She lifted her chin a fraction in the direction of the mirrors, as if to make sure they recorded the angle of her refusal perfectly. "Say your name," the regent intoned. "Lysa." She gave him nothing else. "Say you consent." Silence. It rang almost as bright as the choir. "Say it." The regent smiled. "Please." The word landed like a key. I stepped forward from the shadow and said, "No," not loud. True. The mirrors tried to multiply it, and found they could not. Caliph moved with me, dawn gathering along his shoulders the way heat gathers along a blade laid in sunlight. 1,000 reflections learned my outline at once. The choir's chord dipped. The regent's not shadow tilted its head, curious, hungry. "Sera," Lysa breathed, her voice barely a disturbance in the performance. She didn't turn. She had always been very good at looking where the harm would come from next. "You weren't supposed to come here. You asked me to aim," I said. "I brought a better direction." The regent's eyes crinkled as if I'd told a familiar joke badly. "You disobey so predictably," he said. "I confess I'm touched. We all enjoy our small repetitions. Step away from the dais, dear. Your songs are too untidy for an invocation." Calith's sword did not sing when he drew it. It made the sound a shutter makes when it opens and lets in morning. "You kneel charmingly," he told the regent conversationally. "Try it again." The knot shadow smiled with the regent's mouth. Its interest slid over me, past me, and found the basin. It wanted the basin like a locked door wants a thief. The high chorus, mouse quiet until now, screeched. "Blasphemy," someone warbled. "Sacrilege." Another. "Security." The choir tried to look important, and succeeded at looking loud. Lysa didn't move. Her hands were steady at her sides, fingers curled, the way you keep them when you're carrying a fragile plate and pretending it's heavy so no one wonders why you're not trembling. "Caliph," I said without looking. "If I sing now, they'll lever it through me. They'll try," he said. "Answer, don't declare. Thread the seam you made. I'll keep their hands off the door while you change the lock." "Poetry," the regent said. "How quaint." He stepped nearer, and in his reflection I saw the knot shadow pull closer too, wearing patience like a glove. "Sera," he said, sweet as a clergyman, "do you know the joy of purpose? Serving something larger than yourself? You should try it. It would fix your appetite for attention. I had once wanted him to see me. I let that want rise, and then go as if it were the first breath on a cold morning, visible, harmless, gone. My purpose is older than your mirrors, I said. I laid my bleeding thumb against the basin's underside where the stoneflower mark waited, humble and stubborn. The silver tightened under my skin, then softened, like muscle unclenching. The Heartspire's pull faltered again. I found the hitch. I breathed into it a tone that would barely travel the width of my own palm. The bas relief of the six-petaled flower warmed. The mirror nearest me fogged in a perfect circle, as if a mouth had tried to form and had been denied the courtesy. The regent's face did not change. His eyes did. The knot shadow's patience tore and showed a white, starving edge. It moved, not forward, but everywhere. A bloom of pressure like milk spilled across marble. "Now," Calith said, and his blade met the first guard, who had been brave enough to remember his training. Light cut polite arcs through polished air. Dawn set boundaries, while I set a seam. I answered the basin's lie with a smaller truth. You may reflect, but you do not command. The tone widened, no louder, just more room to breathe. The choir's chord cracked. The mirrors that liked to multiply became uncertain. They did not know how to echo what would not perform. Lisa's bead glinted. She took one breath, then another, and in that second the thing that had been keeping her quiet no longer found purchase in her. "Ribs. Regent," she said, and every mirror turned to her like a field of flowers turning to a new sun. "Your please is theft." The knot shadow snapped a line we could not see. The room recoiled. The basin's surface veined with darkness, spiderwebbing inward from the crude letters. First, light, unmade. "Sing," the regent breathed. No longer patient, no longer smiling. "Sing, girl, or I will pull your voice through your friend and watch you learn the cost of disobedience." He meant Lysa. He meant to reach through me and break her body with my music. I lifted my head and looked straight into the knot shadow where it wore the regent's profile, like a mask someone had dropped and someone else had put on wrong. "No place for mouths," I declared. The tone became a blade. The silver brightened from underneath. The six-petaled mark flashed like a lantern buried in snow. The mirrors along the eastern wall misted, then cleared, then showed nothing at all. Their borrowed eyes blinded where the seam remembered my naming. The knot shadow flinched the way things flinch when they forget they can pretend. The basin cracked, hairline first, then deeper, light and water language breaking together. The choir's hum fell apart into individual breathing. The regent's polished calm fell with it. He looked at me, finally seeing me, not as a nuisance or a fable, but as a problem. His smile returned, bare as bone. He lifted a hand. All the lanterns in the gallery went out at once. All the lanterns died, but darkness didn't arrive the way they wanted. It came polite and heavy, like velvet dropped over a cage, and inside that velvet I heard the room forget its own shape. The choir's last vowel trembled, thinned, and disappeared into breath. The regent stood very still so no one would notice that stillness was the only trick he had left. Beside him, the knot shadow sighed with pleasure, a hunger that thought it had finally been offered a throat. "Night is not a switch," Calith said in the quiet. He sounded like a man standing beside a sunrise only he could see. "It's a seam. Listen. Answer. Declare." I set my bones, let the hush touch all three anchors, and listened until the gallery's pretenses fell away. Under the polished floor, Stoneflower breathed, roots threading the foundation like a patient hand through snarled hair. Farther yet, water moved in the arteries we'd walked, singing to itself the names of stones too old to flatter mirrors. Above, the doubled moons tugged at each other in their slow, inexorable crossing. The air between them held its breath as if waiting for someone honest to speak first. The regent tried to use my silence like a leash. "There," he murmured, voice carrying the warmth of a borrowed hearth. "You feel it, the great mercy of surrender. Let purpose decide for you. Open your mouth, girl, and the world will be better." "Consent," Lisa said, quiet and exact, "is not a spell you cast with someone else's lips." Her bead caught a ghost of light from nowhere and pressed its crack to the word like a seal. The knot shadow flowed, not forward but wide, tasting for seams. It wanted to pour through. Reflections. Through the basin. Through me. It invited itself to my ribs with exquisite courtesy. Answer, not overwhelm. I let a thread of tone fall between my teeth, the smallest possible yes to the oldest possible truth. It went down instead of out. found the stoneflower mark I'd blooded on the basin's underside, and nested there like a spark in dry tinder. The silver remembered a shape it had not been allowed to hold, the Heartspire's leash, hitched again. Pretty, the regent said, turning his head slightly so every mirror could keep enjoying his profile. Useless. Caliph moved. Dawn rose along his blade the way breath rises under a hand at the first waking. Guards surged and he cut them down in clean, exact arcs that did not gloat. Each stroke set a boundary where the knot shadow had hoped for blur. Please, the regent said, and the word reached for my throat like a ring size to fit me. No, I answered, softer than his hunger, heavier than his title. Then I gave the room a sentence I had been saving for the moment when silence would otherwise be the knife. First light remains. The tone I had nested in the basin widened, not louder, wider, as if doors inside the note decided to stand open. The crude gouge, first light unmade, met its opposite and found itself badly carved. A hairline opened across the letters like frost, cracking an old cup. The six-petaled symbol flashed once, pure and stubborn. The mirrors couldn't decide what to show. The ones that clung to flattery fogged. The ones that remembered function went clear. The ones that had learned to spy turned to stone and refused their own polish. The choir forgot to be the choir and started being people with bodies and lungs who did not want to be here anymore. The knot shadow uncoiled patience into anger. It leaned on the basin with no hands and pushed through the seam I had widened. A thief trying to use my own door. I felt the pressure like ice at the base of my skull. Declare. No place for mouths, I said, naming the hunger's favorite lie, and the air remembered the rule I'd carved in it. The gallery's eastern wall went blind where spies had once watched. The knot shadow flinched, then reached higher, for the moons. Kill the lanterns, it had ordered. It had forgotten to order the sky. You cannot switch off a moon. You can only bargain with mirrors. Now, Caliph said, and his now was a hinge on which rooms swing. Lysa moved when he did, a seamstress stepping into the cloth she knows better than its wearer. She slipped past the regent so easily his pride staged the moment as permission, and didn't notice she had never looked at him. Moon thread slid from her wrist and bit into the basin stand like fine wire. She anchored it to the dais. She anchored it to herself. Lysa, I breathed, because my mouth knew her name as a tool you can trust when you're about to cut close. Aim, she said back, and there was no ribbon on the word this time. The knot shadow struck. It came not as teeth, but as agreement, the kind that signs your name for you. It tried to borrow the shape of my voice by offering me a safer version of it. It promised I could sing, and never be blamed if I let it hold the other end of the note. I have said yes to be liked when I meant no to be safe, I told it, paying at the threshold even here. I don't pay with myself anymore. The basin shuddered. A crack zigzagged through the words like lightning deciding to keep what it had taken. The Heartspire's pull faltered a third time. I slid the thread of tone into that stagger and locked it there like a wedge hammered into green wood. Enough. The regent's smile dropped its manners. His voice did not change pitch when he shouted. Only cowards raise pitch. Strike them. Men whose mouths had been trained to say please picked up halberds. Caliph met them and turned blows into instructions. Dawn is not a tantrum. It is a curriculum. The knot shadow lurched toward Lysa, toward the place where it thought I would break if she did. I felt the decision arrive in me as simple as breath. If the world wanted to make a weapon out of my song, it could watch what I chose to aim at. I dropped listening and answering at once, and stepped into declaring not as volume but as vow. I put my bleeding thumb to the Stoneflower mark, and the wedge tone widened into a road. First light remains, I said again, and the word remains stopped being a promise and became description. The basin let go of its borrowed purpose. The old inscription surfaced brighter than the moons, brighter than regret. The crude gouge popped out like a bad tooth. The silver cracked fully, parted cleanly into 6 petals that folded outward, like a flower finally allowed to be what it was carved to be. Through the opening, not darkness, not water, a shaft of daybreak that did not care what hour the sky proclaimed. It rose gentle as bread in a warm kitchen, and absolute as mathematics. The knot shadow made the mistake all knot things make. It tried to perform being real in the presence of something that refused theater. It thinned, reached for a mirror, found stone, reached for a mouth, found no place, reached for me, found a name that did not fit its teeth. Caliph stepped into the ray with me. Light traveled up his sword and down his arm and into the floor where Stoneflower waited. The root road woke like a long animal uncurling. The gallery's foundations hummed. Not violent, not even loud. Just enough to remind the walls who had carried their weight while they played at eternity. The regent looked at me without his rehearsals. He had the sort of face that had been flattered early and often, and therefore mistook exposure for harm. "You don't understand," he said, flat. "I promised them a safer dawn. They need someone to decide. You promised them a mirror." "That never criticizes," I said. "Dawn doesn't ask your permission to arrive." He moved as if to call guards who could no longer hear their cue. Lisa turned, very small on the dais, very precise, and said, "No." The knot shadow tried to wear her mouth. It found I had already given the room its rule. It struck me instead, and met the fact of the claim. "Dawn keeps its own," Caliph said, almost kind, and set his blade. The knot shadow fled upward, fast, seeking the seam between the moons. It meant to leave a gift behind, a rupture we would spend ourselves repairing. I took one step after it, lifted my face to the vault of mirrors and night, and spoke my last declaration as if I were only reciting what the stone already knew. Close where you were never invited, open where you were always meant. The seam between the moons stitched shut like skin. The cold light of their crossing broke into common silver and fell harmlessly over the court. The mirrors did something I had never seen them do. They showed only what was in front of them. One image, one truth, without multiplication. The high chorus dropped their scores. The master of mirrors clutched his ledger to his chest as if it could explain him. It could not. The knot shadow, deprived of its door, dwindled. It found the crack in the floor where we had entered and ran for it like a spill seeking a drain. Stoneflower lifted one root and set it down again. That was all. The crack narrowed and took the hunger with it. Not killing, not forgiving, declining. Silence remained, but it wasn't velvet over a cage anymore. It was the breath after a birth. Lisa let go of the stand. Her hand shook. She looked at me at last. No ribbon, only a question. "Are we still we?" "I envied you," I said. "Here, now, because lies rebuild faster than no palaces if you don't sweep the floor. I loved you. I envied you. I will not hide that envy under useful kindness again." "Then don't," she said. Relief didn't make her prettier. It made her real. "Aim at me when I need it." Calith's hand found my shoulder, with the weight of a decision that did not need to be spoken. Around us, stewards stumbled into bows. Guards tried to pretend they had been brave earlier. Courtiers stared at their hands as if someone had swapped them for tools they did not recognize. The regent stood alone on his dais, smiling a small, exhausted smile that finally belonged to his own face. "You're banished," he said, almost gently, as if granting me a favor he might later rescind. "You cannot come home." I looked at the cracked basin, at the blind mirrors, at Stoneflower's patient symbol warming the floor, and felt the claim thrum in my wrist like a promise that paid itself daily. "I didn't," I said, "and I won't. I meant the court. I meant the habit of wanting its applause. Keep your home." Caliph inclined his head to the room that had tried to make a geometry of obedience out of light. "The border winds will blow differently after tonight," he told no one and everyone. "Be honest about what you loved here and what loved you back." We left through the door we had made, not the ones they offered. The path took us under and out, roots whispering approval. The night above smelled of pine and ash and the kind of cold that keeps promises. When we stepped into it, the eastern ridge held a line of unremarkable gray, not spectacle, certainty. "You sang on purpose," Caliph said, and for the first time his pride was unguarded. "I listened," I said. "I answered. I declared." The words felt like a spine that had always been mine and had finally remembered how to stand. He offered his hand without ring or chain. I took it because I wanted to, not because I was afraid. Behind us, the crystal court rang its bells, late and dissonant. Ahead, a thin brightness threaded the treetops, ordinary as morning. I was banished by crystal, claimed by dawn. The world would not get easier because I knew the difference. It would only ask me to be honest about which enemies I kept. "Where now?" I asked. "Wherever. Light is being held hostage by a flattering mirror," he said with a smile that had learned its limits. "There are more seams than stars." "Good," I answered, and felt the mark on my wrist agree. "I have breath left.